I'm Evan, Head of Engineering for RMSTATOR. I have something very cool to show you. We're really excited to announce this. This is our new SPLYT stator system for the Can-Am. It fits the Can-Am Maverick and Outlander, and we'll have the whole year range on our listing here, but it's 2012 or so and up. So a lot of years that this fits. We did all of our own testing, prototyping, and development on our 2014 Can-Am Maverick 1000R. It's a really nice system. It improves reliability and output from your charging system. So we've had our SPLYT technology available for Polaris applications for the RZR, Ranger, Sportsman for 4 or 5 years now. And it's a very unique technology and it's very interesting. The idea for our SPLYT system is that we take a stock style stator, so the same size. We use our edge core, which is extremely thin stator laminations that can act like a radiator and help pull heat away from the windings. And then we use 2 separate 3-phase windings. So think of it as 2 separate stators wound onto 1 stator core. Okay, then we have those run out to 2 separate voltage regulators. I'll explain why there's no connectors here in a second. So the idea behind this is that we can improve reliability by splitting the stator windings into 2 separate isolated stators on 1 core. And we can, by changing the windings to our own unique winding configuration, we can also get more power out of the original system. Then the reliability side of the system is that we split output from each half of the stator to a separate voltage regulator. Now, when we're dealing with these big modern side-by-sides and ATVs, they have extremely powerful charging systems. Trying to run 650 watts or more through a single voltage regulator is just a bad idea. There's no overhead, they're barely rated to handle that, and they're running at their max capacity all the time. And this leads to regulator failures. So, on our new SPLYT systems, we can add more power overall, but we can split that power output between 2 separate voltage regulators, each running well below its maximum ability, and we get much increased reliability and more power output overall. So really cool, relatively simple idea, cool concept, and it works really well. So for the Can-Am, we have our new system launching. It'll be available very soon. I don't have a production part here to show yet. Our new production parts are really nice. They're white coated. They look really unique. They have a slightly different harness and different connectors. I don't have one here, and I wanted to get this video done to show people what's coming up. So I'm showing an early hand-built in-house prototype, and I did not have, we had a different connector setup in testing. So this is a great reference for you to look at and understand the idea. But you can see this is a rough stator. This is hand wound, hand epoxied to protect it, and this thing's been through hours and hours of brutal testing. So it's a great example, but it's not what our production part will look like. They'll be much nicer, obviously. So the Can-Am system is really cool. It increases the stock system at 650 watts up to 850 watts with a bolt-in stator. No difference in installation between our stator and the original. Has the original type of grommet. Everything's plug and play, very easy install, just like your original. We also include the stator cover gasket, so you have everything you need to seal the stator cover back up, so no problem there. Okay, and from the stator, you'll have your 2 separate outputs. We have 2 separate wiring looms, and these are what needs to go to each of the regulators. We have the kit available with our premium REVOLT voltage regulator. This is hands down best regulator on the market, lifetime warranty, and it is absolutely the one I would go with. We did tons of our testing in the prototype phase with these. We also include our CNC aluminum red anodized series regulators at a lower price point. So that's a great option as well. So very easy wiring install, and you can see the video how everything plugs in, but your connector on the stator output will plug right into the connector on the harness for the stator. And you will have your ring terminal connections for the battery. You'll have a red wire and a black wire that'll go right to the battery terminals. Very simple. And then you will have mating connectors to the regulator on the other end of the harness. And these are keyed and plugged right in. So very easy install, really excellent system. So we have our seat out, like I said, and we're over here at the passenger side of the car. Now, like I said, I already have all these panels loose and they're just set back in here. I just don't think I have a great way to show you actually doing the work here to remove these things. So I'm going to point out as many of the fasteners as I can that have to be removed. Now, just take your time doing this. Don't yank any panel off until it is completely free, because it's very easy to miss a fastener. And let me grab one and I'll show you. All of the fasteners that hold the bodywork together are these push pin plastic clips. So they are pushed down into the hole with the larger base part, and then this top part is pushed in to expand it and hold it in place. So when you want to remove these, I have a Phillips here for pointing at things, but you'd use a small flathead screwdriver and get it right under the lip of this inner piece and pry it up. Once it's up, you can then get under the lip of the base piece and pry it up, and the whole thing will pop out of the hole that holds the two pieces together. You'll get it. Once you do one, it's very easy to remove them quickly, and you can always get replacements. These usually don't last more than a couple install and remove cycles before they start to fall apart, so you can always get replacements for these on Amazon. But you need to remove a ton of these. There's probably, I don't know, I didn't count, but 20 plus, 20, 30 of these maybe that need to be removed to get access down here. So what I did was start by going around up here. So I had these along the top of the console. Here, 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 and same thing on the other side. There's a whole row of them. There's also some at the back here. Okay, so once I did that and I got the console loose, and I could kind of lift it up and see what was next. Well, to fully remove the console, you need to remove the rubber handle here for the passenger grip. And you know what, let me come around from the other side so I can point at stuff a little better. Okay, so there is a Torx head, I think a T30 as well, that secures the top of this rubber grip. And then it was really tight. I had to use a heat gun on it and then just kind of wiggle it side to side and pull up, and I eventually pulled it off. So it comes off fine, just take your time. The heat gun definitely helped to soften the rubber a little bit. And then I put my bolt back there. You'll need to remove the shifter handle here, which I don't know, this is aluminum, might be original, might not, but just screws on with a set like lock nut, not set screw, lock nut type thing at the bottom to pinch it. So you'll need to remove that. And then there is a bolt, I think a T30 Torx bolt here as well that had to be removed. Okay. You need to remove your gauge, not gauge cluster, but switch panel here. There was two bolts up here at the top that are T25s, I believe. Remove both of those. And then I'm not showing this side, but there's a whole row of the plastic push pins along the inside of the center console. So with those all loose, oh, and open your glove box as well. Drop that down out of the way. Okay. With all those removed, you can work the switch cluster loose, and you can set it up and out of the way. Okay. And again, take your time. If anything doesn't want to come off gently, like you have another clip in place somewhere that you need to find. So make sure you take your time, go slow, and remove them all one by one. All right, so then I would remove the center console, which just pulls off just like that. Okay, now I'm going to come back around to the passenger side. Okay, next piece I remove is this inner part of the console, and we'd already removed the top parts that attached it to the cover. There's also parts here along the bottom edge that I think I pointed out a little bit already. You want to remove all of those. I have to close that. And then this inner piece of the console will come off, okay? And it's held on entirely by the push pin clips. I think there's almost 10 on that one piece alone. And so once that's out of the way, sorry, shut off my phone here. Okay, so once that's out of the way, we need to remove the floor piece, which is right down here that the seat sits on. Now, I have it completely loose and kind of out of the way, but it is also held on with push pin clips. So there's two here in the floor, kind of the rocker panel, I guess you call it. There's two each along the rear that go into the back of the bodywork. And then there's some down there at the very bottom that attach it to the front piece of the car. Okay. And then you lift it up and make sure you clear your oil filler dipstick hole there. And then you can remove this entire floor panel. Okay, so what we're left with now is the hole where the fuel tank goes. And you do need to remove the fuel tank to get access to the side cover. I didn't see a good way I could show you removing it, so I'm going to go over and show you what needs to be done on the fuel tank. First thing to pay attention to though is the only way it is actually mounted and secured to the car is 2 bolts here. So we have a 10mm here, and then there's a 10mm down here just in front of the, or right behind the floorboard. You need to remove both of those, and there's a rubber spacer or cushion underneath that can fall out easily, so make sure you grab it. This piece right here. Okay, then you need to disconnect your fuel line, which I have right here, held on with a hose clamp. So you need to disconnect that and pull it off of the fuel pump on top of the tank. We'll show you at the tank in just a second. You need to disconnect your fuel pump connector, which is I have hanging loose right here, and it's just a clip you lift up and pull the wiring away. We'll show you again at the tank. And then you have your vent tube right here, this clear line that is just pressed over a fitting on the tank. So make sure you undo all 3 of those fittings or wires and tubes and stuff first. Remove your 2 mounting bolts, and then you need to come over here. Here's where your gas cap sticks through for the filler on the tank. You'll need to remove your gas cap. And make sure your fuel tank's as low as possible. Run it down as much as you can to not spill. I spilled with a half full tank. I also removed a bolt here and another one here that has a nut on the back. This one threads into the car. And then you're able to flex this panel away a little bit to get the filler neck to clear. Okay, so now let's go over here to the fuel tank. And here's the fittings to show you. So here's your fuel filler cap clearly that you had to remove. Right here is your vent, the clear plastic rubber vent hose goes right here in this vent line. Right here is your fuel line, the large one that had the black fuel line with a clamp on it. And right here is your fuel pump and fuel sender level connector. So that's it. Once you get them all disconnected, you just kind of have to lift the tank up and twist it a little bit, and it comes right out of the car. Again, have it as empty as possible to save yourself the trouble. Okay. Other than that, you need to drain the oil. So come over and show you real quick where that is, and then we're going to get the camera back on the tripod, I think, to show the actual stator removal. So if we look down below, there is a hole right here in the floor pan or the skid plate underneath the car, and there's a 17mm drain bolt right here in the bottom of the crankcase. So you need to drain your engine oil from here. And here's our stator cover we're going to be removing. So we want to get the oil out so we don't dump oil everywhere when this cover is pulled. Only other thing at this step would be to remove your dipstick tube. And it just screws right in to the cover. Make sure your O-ring is still attached and in good shape. That's what seals up so there's no dirt that gets inside. And you get this out of the way. Okay, so with that done, we're about ready to pull the cover here, but you do need to free up your stator wire so they're ready to come out with the cover. So trace your stator wiring as it exits the side cover here, runs up between the cylinders and then along the back of the console, and you need to cut quite a few zip ties to free up the wiring. I think I cut 4 or 5 at least that run all the way back here. So the next step, and I haven't done that yet, I'm going to free up all the stator wiring and pull it through so it's just coiled up loose down here, and then we'll go ahead and set the camera up here and show. We're going to remove all of these Torx bolts that secure the stator cover. I think they're maybe T25s. I'll confirm that in the next clip. That'll loosen this cover. And then just before you remove it, you also want to remove your Hall effect sensor for your ignition and fuel timing, which is this guy right here. And again, I think I'll confirm it. I think it's a T25 Torx. And you just remove the bolt and then just pull the sensor straight up and out. And then I always just put the bolt right back in there a couple turns so I don't lose it. Okay, so I'm going to get the wiring freed up. I'm going to get these bolts loose, and then we're going to show removing the cover. Okay, so I've already actually popped the cover off, but I'll explain here. I don't think we can get a clean shot of actually removing it well and showing you. So there's 11 bolts. I was wrong. Everything's a T30 Torx, not 25. So just to update you. So I removed all 11 T30 bolts all the way around the cover, and we'd already removed our sensor there. So then I pried the cover off. There's a pry spot right here, this little tab, the top part of the cover. there's another pry tab down here on the left side of the cover. So I used my pry tool and just gently pried to pull the cover loose. And then you really just kind of have to pull it away a little bit and get your hand under the edge and then just pull it off. The flywheel is very strong, so it takes a bit of effort. And then we can get our cover completely off. So now we have our cover and stator and everything loose and ready to go. We'll go to the bench in just a second to change it. So here's our flywheel. We're not changing that. These are pretty durable. Not really any reason to worry about this unless there was a failure. Inside, you know, look around, check your oil color. Had some kind of yellowish oil, probably just foam or something. I was wondering at first if there might have been like water in it, but it doesn't feel like it. So anyways, good time to look at what your oil color looks like in your flywheel, see if there's anything weird in here. And a lot of times, this happened to me, the starter gears here that interface the starter to the flywheel one-way gear clutching here, these will often come out with the side cover, and mine did. So these, you just have a shaft here that the gear spins on. There's two shafts, and you have your gear here with that's kind of two pieces, has a small inner gear attached to it. That's the one that meshes with your starter, and then the inner gear sticks out. Then you kind of have the one piece or one gear here that meshes between that and the starter. So it's no big deal if they fall out or if they come out with the stator cover. Just go ahead and put them back into place just like this. And you want them all installed there. Don't try and leave them in the stator cover. It'll be too hard to line up. So when you put it back in, now everything should line up and the flywheel will pull it back into place. Then make sure you pull your old gasket off. So I'm going to try and see if it comes off in one piece, hopefully. Would be nice. I see there's a little bit of, I don't think this has ever been changed. This is all original. There's a little bit of sealant here on the original grommet. And I'm going to gently see if I can pull my cover off in one piece, which will be nice. Doesn't always work. Or gasket, sorry, not cover. Oh, yes, there we go. Oops. Oh, one sec, I got it stuck. The hole in the flywheel. Oh, okay, well, I tore it. But anyways, got it off in one piece, basically, which leaves the case clear, which is nice. So just make sure you clean up your case well. There's no gasket left on it before we're ready to reinstall. I use a little bit of black RTV silicone on both sides of the gasket to make sure it seals well. But now we're going to go over to the bench and we will swap our stator out in the cover. Okay, so we have our stator cover on the bench. I'm going to remove our old stator. The stator is mounted down to the cover with Torx T30 bolts, so I've already loosened them. I'm going to remove all three. And then down here we have the metal clamp that clamps the wires out of the way of the flywheel. I've already removed it, or I've already removed the bolts, so I'll pull it out of the way. It's held in place by two small Phillips head bolts. So those are out of the way. Clamps out of the way. Now we can remove the grommet and just pick the stator up and lift it out. You can set it out of the way. Okay, so good time to look down in the cover, make sure there's no chunks of metal or anything interesting in there you don't want to see. We just have some clean oil in there, so that's fine. So we're going to install our new stator. Now this stator, this is a prototype we're testing here. It's going to look different than our RM0 1399, which is our OEM replacement style stator. So this is a hand wound stator with different winding setup, so you'll probably notice it looks different than our typical replacement or your OEM, so don't worry about that. Okay, so going to line the stator up on the boss in the center. Make sure the mounting holes are lined up. Make sure that your wires are routed so they are between the two holes there for the metal wire clamp. Okay, I'm going to install the stator mounting bolts. I always use red Loctite Permatex thread locker on these as it's high temp. And it'll definitely still come loose, but it locks up pretty well and it really prevents these bolts from ever working out when the stator's in the vehicle. Okay, so I put it on all three of the stator mounting bolts, and then I'm going to use it on the wire clamp as well. Get these started. Okay, tighten them all up evenly, and I'm going to clean out this case a little bit before I finish, because I have some of our epoxy on the windings that looks like it's flaked off a little bit, so I'll clean out the center there before we put it back on our typical OEM style replacement stators. That's not an issue, but like I said, this is a hand-built part for testing. Okay, so we have our wires. Make sure they're in place well down there. They are. Take our wire clamp, put it down here. Probably going to get the grommet out of the way, so sorry, this is probably going to be difficult to see until I get this lined up here. Use some Loctite. Set it in the hole in the clamp and get it lined up and started. Okay, so there's one started. And use a little more thread locker on the other one. Okay, there we go. So I'm just going to pull up here, make sure the wires are centered, and then tighten down the clamp. There we go. Okay. Then I'll get my grommet back into place. Just like that. Alright, and then last step is just make sure your gasket surface is clean. Our old gasket came off real well, so I don't see any problems here. And then we're going to put the gasket on the motor side first, but I'm just showing you. What I usually do is I'll put a really thin layer of black RTV right around here, and then on the motor as well, and I'll stick the gasket onto the motor side. That way I can just line this up and put slot it all in. So I'm gonna get that ready, and we'll go back over to the car and get this reinstalled. Okay, so now we're back over here at the engine, ready to put our cover back on. Again, make sure you have your gears, the shafts are in, the gears are lined up and meshed and all. You don't want to have a problem with that later. So I have our gasket installed with some RTV on both sides. Now I'm gonna pick up the case, and we'll try and cover this as best we can. You want to hold on tight because the stator is going to get sucked into the flywheel, and you need to kind of maneuver the case around until you get both of those shafts for the starter to line up. So I'm gonna have to stand up over here and maybe come down from this side, see if you can catch some of it. So there's not any shortcut here. You just have to take your time, fight the stator getting pulled into the flywheel while you line up the shafts. There we go. And then it'll pull itself into place once you're done, but it might take a couple tries to get that all lined up correctly. Okay, once you do though, there's not much to it. It should pull itself into place well. If those two shafts are centered in their holes and the stator's centered, I mean, there's not much that can go wrong once you get it lined up. After that, put your 11 bolts, I believe it was, back into your cover. and we will get them all tightened up. So let me do that. I'm going to, where's my last one? Okay, I'm going to get the cover tightened up. Then I'm going to reinstall the Hall effect sensor, which will go right back into the hole here, single bolt through its tab. I'm going to make sure I plugged everything else back in, which was, I don't think I mentioned it, but I unplugged this sensor right here. It's probably oil temp or coolant temp or something. It was right above the stator wiring. I'll plug it back in. I'm going to reinstall our tube for the oil dipstick, and then we'll start working on the stator wire routing back to the regulator. So let me get this all tightened up and then we'll start showing that. Okay, so cover's reinstalled and tightened all the way around. Hall effect sensors reinstalled. I installed our, not sure again what that one is, maybe oil pressure, is reinstalled, and I routed the wiring following the same path. So back up between the cylinders, around the edge, and along the frame, and I reinstalled some zip ties all the way along to support the stator wiring. I reinstalled the oil tube, dipstick tube. I refilled the engine with oil, 2.2 quarts, and let's see what else. So I think that about buttons up everything on this side. I did go ahead and change the oil filter while I was at it. This car didn't need it, had a new one, relatively new, but put a new filter, which is right here. 3 Torx bits. It's a Can-Am KN152 filter if you use a Can-Am, so easy to replace while you're at it here. And then I cleaned up the case a little bit. You know, you really can't pull the filter and the cover without getting some oil down here on the skid plate, so I cleaned up a little bit down here, cleaned up the cover a little bit. So at this point we have still to reinstall our fuel tank, which again I'm not going to show, I don't think, because there's not a lot to see and it's really hard to handle the fuel tank in here. But again, it just drops into place, 2 bolts front and rear, and then our 3 connections, our vent line, fuel line, and fuel pump connection. So I'll do that later, and I'm still doing some other stuff on this car, so I'm not putting it all back together at the moment anyways. But that's our stator install. So really hard part's getting to it. Pretty easy to do once you're back here. Like I said, routed the wires back up and along the frame, and then let's go to the back of the car. Okay, so we're at the back of the car here. We have 2 panels that need to be removed so we can get easy access to the voltage regulator and the stator wiring. Technically, this big, larger back panel doesn't have to come out, but it's only like 6 bolts and it's a lot easier to just get it out of the way. This one does for sure to get access to the wiring. So I've already loosened and removed all of them. We'll show you how to do it. It's a Torx T30 bit for all the head of all these screws, and then a 10mm nut on the bottom of each one. So that's how I remove them. I already have them loose and the nuts attached back to the bolts here. So we've got, let's see, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 all the way around. Once those are removed, you can pull this whole panel out of the way. Okay, and you'll see the aluminum mounting bar where the bolts went through. Then the front panel here has 4 bolts, same T30 with a 10mm nut, and we have 2 of them that attach to this aluminum bar, 2 of them that attach to the frame. So I've already done those and removed them. I just reattached the aluminum bar here so I didn't lose it, but the aluminum bar sits underneath these brackets. It'll be pretty obvious when you reinstall it. All right, so here we are at the back of the car, and we'll take a look at finishing up the wiring for our split install. Okay, so we need to install our voltage regulators. We have the REVOLT regulators on our car here, but we also sell this with our red CNC housing regulators. So you can see for the REVOLT, I've installed one over here on the right side in place of the original regulator, and we used one of the original mounting holes and drilled a new mounting hole. So you can see that right there. And then here was the original regulator connector for the factory harness, which we don't use anymore, and it just stays out of the way. And we don't have the original stator plug there as it's been removed with the original stator. Let's go over and look at the second regulator. So here's where I mounted our second regulator. We have another REVOLT right here, kind of just directly opposite of the original. And we have just drilled 2 new holes in the plastic and mounted it down right there. So I have a second battery and a battery isolator on this car. and the battery is mounted right next to it. So if you do run our battery isolator, great spot to mount it down there, but that's not what this video is about. Okay, so let's talk about the wiring. Now, we talked about running our stator wiring just up the backbone. So I'm going to show right there was the original motor cover, kind of backbone of the frame, and we ran our stator wiring up along it, and then it exits out right here underneath the plastic of the body. So here is one of the stator connectors right here. This left side comes off one leg of the stator, and over here is the second stator connector, comes off the other leg of the stator. Does not matter which goes to which side. So you can see both of those sitting there. Then we have our harnesses attached. So right here we have our mating connector for the stator plugged in, and it runs right over here and plugs right into the into the gray connector on the regulator. Now this harness, this is a test car. This is using kind of a modified harness that I had cut up. So you'll notice these are separate. Your harness comes packaged together like in one loom, and that's okay. Same wiring, just a little different because this has been a prototype vehicle. But you can see our stator connector there run right to the regulator, and then out of the regulator we have our red and black wires, and they run right over here and right to our battery terminals. So you can see, comes out right here. We have red to battery positive, black to battery negative. Okay, well, let's look at our other side. Like I said, we have our stator wiring right here. They're plugged in together. Wiring, yellow wires run right up here into the gray connector, plugs right into the regulator. And then the black connector for the battery side comes right out of that, runs right back here, and I think it's, there it is, this side. And then here's our black and red wires, run again right to the battery terminals. So very easy setup. Plugs right in, everything's keyed, color-coded connectors. They plug right into the regulators and then right to the battery terminals. So really easy to do. Installation is the same whether you use REVOLT or one of our other voltage regulators. And then it's always a great idea to run a voltmeter on these. I have one on the dash of this car. I use our battery, our dual battery isolator system that you can see I have mounted there. And if I go up to the front, there you go. You can see that I've got our dual battery voltmeter there. So very nice setup. This is a great running, great charging car, and it's a really, really excellent charging system. So anyways, hope that explains how to install it, and I hope you're really happy with your new high output, high power Can-Am split system from RMSTATOR.